Hi guys, welcome to the guide. In this episode we're going to be going over the North American A-36 Apache. And if you know anything about airplanes, and I'm assuming you do because you're watching this, that you're looking at your screen right now going, that's a P-51, dumbass. Stupid cracker, what are you trying to pull here? And yes, you're right, it is a P-51. But let me just get to it. Just bear with me for a bit. I'll get there. Alright. So, yes, it's a P-51 Mustang. It's the ground attack version of the P-51 that was built as a way to keep the production line filled in 1942. Because in the United States in 1942, we had already used up our fighter budget for the year, I guess you could say. So there was no more money to put into a fighter project like the P-51 Mustang, which was a really nice fighter, and they knew it, but they didn't have money to put into it. So they wanted to keep production going for that year, so they came up with the A-36 because they still had money for an attack aircraft contract. So they pretty much just found a loophole and they ran with it. Alright, so later in the war, it was designated the Apache. That's the United States official name, but nobody liked it because we were a bunch of racist assholes in World War II. So we call the pilots eventually started calling it the Invader in Italy, and the Germans called it Screaming Helldiver. So the Germans did not like it very much. A total of 500 were built in 1942. And that was mostly just to keep it in production. Alright, it had a wingspan of 37 feet and was 32 feet long. Its top speed was 365 miles per hour. My bad. We're in the specs section, just to let you know, they're kind of boring. It was powered by an Allison V12 liquid-cooled engine that produced 1,325 horsepower. It did not have a supercharger, which was one of its main drawbacks. It was good at low altitudes, but above about 15,000 feet, it would really start chugging along, and it was not very good at that. It had a range of 550 miles, so it did not receive the legendary P-51's endurance quite yet. And it was armed with 6 50 caliber machine guns, mounted in the wings, 3 in each wing. That's pretty much standard throughout World War II. And could carry up to 1,000 pounds worth of bombs. Alright. So, the P-51 Mustang, because like the history's kind of intermingled here, first started service with the British RAF, who loved it, but it didn't have a supercharged engine at the time, so it was limited to low altitude operations like ground attack and reconnaissance, stuff like that. But below 15,000 feet, it was a great plane, and it scored its first air victory in the hands of a Canadian squadron. Never underestimate the Canadians, who used it to shoot down a German Focke-Wulf FW-190, which at the time was Germany's premier fighter. It was supposedly better than the Messerschmitt Bf-109, so that's impressive. Alright, so how did the P-51 become the A-36, which I already kind of went over? It was 1942. General Oliver P. Echols and the fighter project officer Benjamin S. Kelsey liked the P-51 a lot. They saw the potential in it, but they didn't have no money to fund for another fighter plane. So instead, they stuck it into an attack aircraft project, for which they did have money, and that's how the A-36 came to be. Pretty much all they did is they modified a standard P-51 with air brakes, additional bomb racks, and they reinforced the wings to make them more heavy duty and could take a hit better. But as a ground attack plane, the A-36 proved to be pretty good at what it was doing. Obviously, it was a great performing airplane. It's based off of the P-51. I mean, come on now. It proved to be pretty rugged, but it's not anywhere near as rugged as like a P-40 Warhawk or a P-47 Thunderbolt. Like, it's a fighter plane. It's rugged for a fighter type aircraft, but it's not rugged as far as the standards of ground attack aircraft go. It was rugged, but it's not like crazy rugged. I guess that's what I'm going for. And in the United States service, it saw combat in North Africa, the Mediterranean, Sicily, and the Italian campaign. So that's kind of all together. That was mainly where it saw its service. It was responsible for shooting down a total of 84 enemy aircraft in the European theater. I mean, well, in North Africa, Mediterranean, Sicily, Italy. It didn't really see too much combat in Europe. And it made one ace, Lieutenant Michael T. Russo. Shot down at least 5 planes flying the A-36. So, that's kind of a side note. It's semi-impressive, but not really that impressive. But by June 1944, it had been all but replaced in Europe by the more rugged P-40s and P-47s, because it was a good performing ground attack plane, but it was not. It's a fighter plane. Fighter planes aren't necessarily the most rugged plane around. It was just a way to kind of keep the P-51 in production while they were coming up with money for the next year to produce it. That's pretty much all the A-36 really came to be. And it turned out to be good at a ground attack aircraft. It's just it's a fighter plane. It's really what it is. It's a fighter plane, alright? It's a fighter plane pretending to be an attack plane. That's what it is. Alright. So it was sent to the Pacific. It was in the China, Burma, India theater. So it was in there. It was used as a reconnaissance plane, a ground attack plane, and a fighter plane, but it didn't really do very good in the Pacific theater because the Japanese fighters just could outmaneuver it, and it was pretty much outclassed because Japanese emphasis on just straight up maneuverability. And from what I got out of it, it did not do very good in the Pacific theater. And P-51s in general, when they brought them over in like late 1945 from the European theater, like P-51s in general were not very well liked in the Pacific theater. Like they didn't seem to do very well in the Pacific for some reason. But yeah, its main opponent was the Nakajima, I butchered that name, Ka-43 Oscar, which was it's not the best remembered, but it was probably the best Japanese fighter of the war. It was the Army's version of the Zero, but it was smaller and even more nimble. So like, think of the Zero but smaller and better, and that's the Oscar. So that's what the A-36 was up against in the Pacific, and it did not do very well. And on top of that, it was put in charge of escorting transport planes over the hump, which is pretty much over the Himalayas, which I already said it was bad at that. It was not a high altitude airplane. It didn't have a supercharger that let it go up high, and you stick it flying escort missions over the Himalayas, the tallest mountain range in the world, and you expect it to go good. It did not go good. So yeah, that's some basic info about the A-36, which I was unaware of this plane. I was semi-aware of it, but I just didn't really know before I did this. So I'm learning things as I'm making this stuff up too, which is kind of interesting. Alright. So, in closing, it proved to be a great performing ground attack fighter, because it's based off the P-51. But it was rugged, but it wasn't the most rugged plane in the world. There was other planes that could do the ground attack better than it. And it was mainly used to keep the P-51 in production throughout 1942. And because of that, it spawned the legendary P-51 Mustang. I mean, how awesome is that? It's the P-51 Mustang, or it's like the way they kept it in production. Alright, I think that's enough random gibberish for the day. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button. Subscribe, because I'm slowly working my way through this War Thunder game. And I will have pretty much all of the main airplanes throughout this process in here, and you can listen to me just ramble on about stuff.